Alright, we've got one package, but it's been kind of heavy and it is a little bulky, so that was helpful. So it might still be a decently sized update. We do have to be careful with this kind of packaging because, you know, applying the scissors to it tends to spread crap all over the place. Let's just gather this all together like so, and begin with Magical Girl Ore, or maybe that's Ore, which looks kind of amusing. That looks like a guy to me. So this makes me think this is a guy that transforms into a magical girl. It looks like it's not entirely his choice. Love makes a girl stronger. And I could be mistaken, but no, that's just my impressions. Here we go. Yep, definitely two guys. I can't help but think this looks a lot more like a girl. Although it's really hard to tell. It looks like she actually has a pair of boobies, you know, not balls, but maybe the girl transforms into a magical guy? I'm definitely curious because this looks conceptually amusing without, you know, reading into detail what it actually says there. Interesting. Next up, we've got a stuffed throat, and this is, if you're curious, it's not code. I just suck at drinking water. This is season 3 of Medabots. 39 episodes on standard definition. Let's see. It looks like audio is Japanese. So the other one I didn't look because I saw the only single audio thing that's a Japanese audio with English subtitles, and this one is also Japanese. No, this is English with English subtitles as an option. Interesting. Oh, you know, so far it's nice. 2 for 2. We've had insides different from the outsides. And I'll comment on what I was noticing about that later. Okay. And next up is Boruto, and I think I saw the Blu-ray down here. And, you know, I've seen this cover when I ordered it, but for a while there when I was watching this and looking at this inside, I thought it looked like Ishoku reviewers. That show about the guys who review having sex with different kinds of demi-humans, I think. And I didn't think that one was slated to come out on DVD Blu-ray. I haven't seen it. Doesn't mean it isn't, but it does mean that in all the circles that I normally go, I haven't seen it yet. You know, this is Viz, so this is going to be English dubbed. I see a region A there. That seems about par for the course. 14 episodes, English. Subtitles, English and Japanese audio. Okay. Oh my god, there's more plastic underneath the thing. Well, maybe I didn't take out plastic from the top, so that could make sense, but I'm sure after last week's me cutting the underside of my thumbnail at some point, you know, you'd probably prefer if I don't do stuff like that. Okay, yeah, Deku looking pretty cool there. Saitama looking pretty Saitama. Looking cooler there. That's just a reminder. I think Viz tends to own a lot of the manga rights to a lot of the series that they put out, so... Whoa, that's a loose disc. And unfortunately, while I'm very curious about a lot of the character designs for Boruto, watching it is very low priority for me. Especially since the person I was suffering through Naruto with is... They found Naruto Shippuden to be a perfectly fine stopping point, which I can't say I disagree with them. And I think there's also the problem that we were watching that one subtitled, and when you're watching anime subtitled, it's generally difficult to do other things, and when it's not as engaging, that can also make things even worse. KashiMashi, Girl Meets Girl, on Blu-ray. I've mentioned before that I'm not a big fan of this show. Trying to remember. It's the basic premise that our main character was a guy, but the aliens accidentally killed him and brought him back to life, but they're like, oh, we didn't know what gender he was supposed to be, so they made him a girl. And then there's this other girl who has this kind of strange emo made-up disease that I'm sure is inspired by some real-life stuff, but it's one of those things where if she feels like she's being treated too badly, then she loses the ability to tell people apart. And it's one of those things where it's just like, you kind of have to be careful. I know Please Teacher kind of had that sort of problem, I thought. And I don't know. It gets kind of to where this thing where, yes, there are people in trouble who really could have people reach out to them, but if they demand people do it and try to force it and make it where people don't want to, then I don't know. Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, Season 1. Curiosity. Just wondering if that fingernail feels a little weak. Did I do something to it again? So, still nothing. I guess we can see the outline of a castle there. What can we tell about the back? It looks like there's an English dub. And, I was thinking that said but that's let your imagination soar with the wings of a fairy. I thought that said wines of a fairy. Okay, those G's and T's are very confusing. And it looks very curious. I see Puss in Boots there. This is 24 episodes in standard definition, so this is, Eastern Star. So this is an older series. I thought this was a newer one. I'm like, did they come up with some newer spin on it? But no, this is probably one that actually is kind of straightforward implementation of a lot of that stuff. And last but not least, we have Phantasy Star Online 2. I'm trying to read that. Episode Oracle, Part 1. I just can't help but think I'm reading episode wrong, but no, the more I read it, the more it's like, yeah, Episode Oracle. So, I see a region A and B. I feel like it's Japanese with English subtitles only. The biggest problem with this is I've not really played any Phantasy Star Online, so it feels like it's hard to want to start this. I see this is Japanese with English subtitles only. Anticipated anime adaptation of the popular Phantasy Star Online 2 game. Now, it's very possible that because there's lots of RPGs made in anime, that it could be a very standalone thing, and it could be something to watch. It wouldn't be the first time I've done that. I think I did that with Xenosaga, and I understood absolutely nothing, but I can't help but think that was maybe something the original game did as well. But I don't know. Not sure what to think about it, but here's this week's Anime DVD Collection update.
So I think this part should be interesting. I've at least been wanting to talk about it. I think a lot of y'all tend to prefer this because this is the part where you hear people talking about stuff, whereas I know a lot of people like to see the unboxing. That's the part I would like, but let's talk about this. So Babylon. Last week I had started watching and I was saying that it was actually seeming pretty interesting. And it seemed to do okay keeping that interesting momentum going, where I mentioned that the antagonists seemed really good. I mentioned some of the problems with the show. The problem with it is that for like the last 2/5 of it, maybe the last quarter, I don't know. I have trouble telling where the episodes did exactly what, but it did kind of lose its steam. And in a way that's kind of bad. I felt like the ending was okay. It still did something interesting for the ending, but so if you weren't here last week, one of the problems I mentioned is, it kind of had this made up thing with this, okay, yeah, here's a place where, okay, they can experiment with laws or something like that. And they kind of gave some examples that are like, it sounds smart, but only at a very shallow level. The idea then being, they mentioned, oh, what about, laws to get drugs into the market faster? And like I said, the problem is, there could be problems with the current process where maybe they're slower than they really should be, but it isn't in and of itself obvious that it's better for a drug to just enter the market faster, because, historically speaking, we've had drugs enter the marketplace very quick and either be snake oil at best, or at worst, well, okay, at best it actually does what it was, but there's plenty of snake oil when things go wrong. So when things go wrong, at best it's snake oil, but worst case, the drug actually has other effects that harm people. And a lot of the stuff that exists in place is to make sure we take things carefully. It's we want to be dependent on drugs, and drugs aren't just some magical, there we go, that illness is just canceled. It's chemistry and genetics, and there's going to be some people who maybe don't react to chemicals the same way, not even necessarily because of genetics. It could be environmental factors that have caused immune systems to choose to react to certain things certain ways. And what if you come out with a drug and it's like, oh well, we've tested this and it's really, 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 really super effective, it has no side effects whatsoever, and all the people we've tested, and then when you do it at the public at large, you find like half the population has a very bad reaction to it because of some sort of exposure to something in the atmosphere that makes their body wary of the chemical and cause the immune system to attack itself, or something weird like that. So that was the example then, and I should have seen the reason the anime kind of came up with that example and why it was such a shallow example is because it had an even bigger one with an even shallower, I'd say, sort of thing. And the shallowness more comes from the fact that, okay, so every single episode ends with, and this is every episode on the Blu-ray, and it's annoying, but it's like, whatever, even though watching a show that brings up the concept of suicide wouldn't make me say, oh, well, the character on the screen just did it, maybe it's a good idea. It's not necessarily for people like me. There can be people in bad places watching the show, and maybe precautions like that can be, if this show is making you feel a little uncomfortable, or you're kind of noticing that your friend you're watching it in is starting to look at that noose, well, I mean, he's probably looking at the noose because you're in that last part of the series where the show starts to slow down and lose focus, I guess. But long story short, the core concept of the show is about suicide, and they're really talking about what the show calls the suicide law. And there's a lot of problems with it. Like, you got some people that bring up some of the problems with it, but nobody that really brings up anything actually substantive, I guess. Just shallow substantive. And the show just kind of, goes forward as if, I wasn't thinking of that stuff. Why should I? And the problem is, basically that part where the show slows down is when it first introduces the least realistic American president I've ever seen. And I am including Terry Crews president from Idiocracy in there, or at least with that one you can be like, well, yeah, if the entire nation became really stupid and everybody really thought that president voting was just a popularity contest, then yeah, Terry Crews would win hands down. I mean, there's probably some people that could give him a run for his money, but the point is, and this is something I've complained about before, the presidency of the United States isn't really as glamorous a position as I like to think. In fact, it's only more it's only more glamorous than it is now because of the fact that people think it's glamorous. And this leads to problems where people think, oh, they didn't win the popular vote. Well, that's because the President of the United States isn't supposed to represent the people as in like the individual persons. It's supposed to represent the people from the point of view that we're trying to find a balance between each of the individual states essentially being individual countries, and that there's different levels of population. So that's why you're not supposed to have a huge group of people that are living very close together, just having their votes elect a president who thinks of things that appease people that live close together. You also want to have some sort of balance set so that people who live far apart also get some representation. So people have to, kind of spread themselves out a little bit instead of focusing on like 5 cities. And it's all well and good, but the point is, people have this expectation of what the presidency is. They have this unexpected thing where they think they're doing some sort of popular vote when they're not. They think the president has more powers than he actually does, and then blame him for one thing or the other. And, it's just really weird. And I think the Trump administration stuff really did that, especially a lot of the hit pieces against them, which I'm looking at, I'm like, what makes you think he would even be able to do that? Even he didn't say he was going to do that. People are just crazy. They still are, it's all crazy. But the point is, in this one, they took a very Japanese approach to it. And this one's kind of an interesting one, where, idiocracy is like, well, with the dumbing down or the simplification of the presidential process, of course they're going to vote some dumb jock, essentially, to be president. That's what Idiocracy basically did with Terry Crews. Really awesome guy who's just like, flamethrowers, yeah! And, whereas in this, they're like, oh, he's called the Thinker because he's known for sitting there and thinking until he knows what the right move is. And I'm like, that's really good. And I know that there's this popularization of intellectuals in Japan, but that doesn't exist in the States, and it especially doesn't exist for the presidency. So, while I would think he would make a good president, I don't think he would make it there. First of all, he'd be eaten alive at any debate, because if he's spending all his time thinking, then he's not really making any points. And people eat that shit up like fucking crack, candy, or something. I don't know. And, he's also, he stays up really late at night playing video games, and, I'm not going to say that, like, the president necessarily has the most backbreaking stuff, but it is exhausting to do a lot of office work. And I don't mean physically exhausting, I mean mentally exhausting, where you're just going to shut down. And video games is one thing, but video games until late at night every single day or something like that, I don't think so. Eventually, they just end up like me, especially since, if you're going to have a president, they should in theory be older than me. Not because every president should be older than me, but because usually people who are going to be running for president have actually made attempts to do a lot of stuff in politics so that they actually have recognition for political views, political actions, whatever. So younger presidents tend to still even be older than I am. And I'm 38, so it's not old, but I'm sure plenty of y'all watching this are like, well, it's still way older than I am. Man, I'm going way off tangent because, there's lots of thought-provoking things about these two anime, but it's something I'm complaining about, not because, I guess because, overall they want to think, and the show gives some interesting thoughts, but it does kind of end up being this thing where it's doing a slow job of introducing their thinking president who thinks by saying, well, I tried reading the Bible to see why... The Bible isn't the reason suicide is fucking wrong. That isn't even a thing that all Americans would think. I would even think that most Americans wouldn't think, oh, I should probably look at the Bible to see why suicide is wrong. First of all, most people's gut reaction is that suicide is wrong, and when you look at some of the reasons why, it's surprising that the show did the most half-assed way of addressing them. Like, okay, economically speaking, it doesn't work for an individual to commit suicide because they talked about, the money they would make and the money they would spend, etc. And I can't help but think, what about the people they support? So if you make it where anybody can just commit suicide, whatever, then the people they support are up shit's creek if they lose one of their important safety nets in another person. So there's kind of this social agreement that we're not going to kill ourselves because we're going to look for better solutions. And that also hints into the problem where if you make it where suicide is legal no matter what, well, the big problem is there are people who see suicide as a solution when it's not one that really helps. It's an escape. And maybe you should say people should be allowed to escape, but the problem is, you know, a lot of those people look back 5 years later and say, yeah, I was in a bad place, but I like where I am now, and I'm glad I didn't do that. And you can't tell if you're going to be at that place in 5 years. There's definitely going to be some people who 5 years later are still in that bad place, maybe because they're ill. And this is the thing, you know, it's not like this law proposed was nuanced. It was just, oh yeah, everybody should. And it could use some examples of people where it's like, well, if somebody was allowed to kill themselves, they could make this situation better. And you could point out, yes, but there's other situations where we know they took the wrong way out because they're like, my girlfriend left me, I'm never going to see another girl again, I should just kill myself. And it's like, well, no, most people actually meet other people if they go out and look for people. And most of those relationships suck, in my opinion, but, you know, that's to each their own. And I could be completely wrong. It's just my point of view that it's like, it doesn't seem worth the energy, but other people are like, no, I still want a significant other. And I think it's kind of similar to the presidential voting thing in that it's people glamorizing or idealizing something. Like, they were my one true love, and, you know, most people don't really understand the way love works, and the fact that when you get down to it, you get attached to people, but if they don't get attached to you back, then it's actually the foundations of a very unhealthy relationship. But I don't know. This is a lot of complaining to say. Oh, and then of course the financial impact. They also don't include the fact that, oh, well, they showed people jumping off of rooftops. Well, you know what? Those people don't exactly clean themselves up. They kind of leave a mess behind that somebody else has to deal with. And trying to say that there's benefits that come out of it just starts going down the broken window fallacy. And if you're unfamiliar with that fallacy, it's the idea that if you had somebody who walks around town throwing rocks in windows, but they work for a glass shop and they're like, oh no, it was really good because it generated a bunch of business and, you know, the economy was flowing and all that stuff. Well, no. Because a lot of it got lost unnecessarily to things that weren't ready to be replaced. So instead of that finance maybe going to something that needed it, or maybe actually being invested or something like that for the person's own sake of their future, it's somebody who's really saying, oh, well, I'm forcing myself in a part of the economy. Doesn't matter what the effect is to the rest of y'all. And suicide's kind of similar in that way, in that, I mean, I talk about that kind, but pretty much any way of killing yourself other than maybe something that's really, really planned, like some sort of doctor-assisted suicide or something, is inevitably going to be creating messes for other people. And, of course, doctor-assisted suicide would, of course, introduce its own conundrums in terms of, well, then only people who are rich enough to afford a doctor would be able to do it. But at the same time, I don't know. And so they never really talk about any of this stuff. That just surface level skimmed over some of this stuff and then threw shocks at you. And it was okay until it started spending entire episodes, oh, we have to think about it. And again, I don't want to spoil how it ended, but while it had some interesting thoughts, it still was one of those things where you just watch a bunch of politicians in a room kind of floating around in space, you know, in a mental, oh, we're thinking about stuff scenario. And it's just with the most unrealistic American president ever, and the other country rulers might have been pretty bad as well, but, you know, since we weren't seeing things through their perspective, they were already just going to be very shallow caricatures of whatever idea the author was wanting to present at that time in order for them to kind of talk about this stuff. But I don't know. So overall, I don't regret spending my time on it, but it was definitely not a very exciting end to the series. So make of that what you will. I'd say it's sort of thing where if you really like I don't know what I would compare it to, but if you definitely enjoy those things where you see somebody needing to uncover stuff, and it's not necessarily a murder mystery sort of thing, although it kind of is that at the same time, it works out. Anyways, let's go on to the next one, which is the Nekopara animation. And it's okay. I'm trying to think if I'm 4 or 5 episodes in, so I've given it a fair share, and I went past the episode 3 points, so it's a good sign. The anime has plenty of problems with it. I wonder if most of them tend to be the same sort of problems with Nekopara as a franchise in general, where, I think I've mentioned this before, but sometimes you have an anime where it's pretty clear that whoever was working on it doesn't really know cats. They like cats, but they don't really know cats, so they have behaviorism that's like explained with, oh, here's a cat's thoughts expressed, but that's definitely not what the cat would be thinking if it was doing that in real life. So it's more like some make-believe cat thing on top of a make-believe cat thing, which is harsh. And Nekopara, I don't remember how pronounced this was in the game, and I only played the first game, so I don't know if other games kind of elaborated on stuff and made it bad. And I don't remember the OVA necessarily being that bad, but are they cats or are they humans? Because it kind of feels like the show doesn't really know for certain. Because, like, sometimes it seems like they don't have very cat-like worries. And the truth of the matter is that was present in the game. I mean, the cats wanting to be with their favorite owner, that's not even a cat or a human thing. That's definitely an anime girl thing, where it's just like, well, they're cute anime girls, so of course they want to be with their main guy character, and so they're going to follow him there. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. And there's other things where it's just like, okay, well, you have our main characters working in a patisserie shop, you know, a baked goods shop, and they're being advertised in the show as being a cat cafe sort of thing, I guess, but it's just sort of like, because they are essentially humans but kind of grew up faster and kind of never quite stopped being completely dumb in some manner, and that's just a very shallow way of describing it. It's like, of course they would be the kind of entities that you would be trying to have, and, you know, work for you, do simple labor for you. It's like, okay, well, if you're hoping they were catching mice, well, they go to bed and wake up at the same time as normal humans do, so they're not going to be nocturnal creatures going after nocturnal vermin, so they're not going to be mice catchers. So at this point, you're just saying they're companions, but then it's really weird when it's only cat. And, you know, the game, the franchise, it doesn't try to go that deep into it, but it's still one of those things where it's just like, well, if you try to introduce it to the wide world and say, yeah, it's a cat cafe, I'm going to be like, those might not be as common, but given what cats are in this universe, it's highly suspect that it would try and mix things. It makes the universe feel very fake. But I think that's something that's just been present, and usually people like different things about the show other than that. Whether it's the presentation, music, characters, you know, usually I think it's a lot of that stuff. And a couple of things that feel weird with the show. So usually Nekopara is chocolate and vanilla. This one feels like it's chocolate, and vanilla is just kind of almost relegated to background status, which I don't feel like the games or the OVA did. And I kind of understand why it feels like it's sort of going that way, but it's really unfortunate because they as a pair are interesting, and this one isn't really about them as a pair being interesting, but I think maybe more people like the Chocla character, and that's why she's probably gotten a little leg up. It occurs to me that I should mention that I think I mentioned blonde-haired girl there, not knowing if she was a character I'd seen before, and now I realize her name's Maple, and yeah, she was in the games and all that stuff. I think she's the one I just keep forgetting. This one's new. I don't remember if I even pointed them out. I think I did. Oh yeah, the other problem with this is the only male character I remember seeing is the main guy. And the real problem with that is, now I'm really worried, why aren't there any cat boys? And another part of me thinks that the answer to that is, that's because they don't show us the hard labor camps, but... or, you know, there's something a little more... I don't know if that would be innocent or devious, where cat girls only breed with human males to create more cat girls. I was trying to remember, that was reminding me of Elfen Bride. It's a hentai, and there's harpians in there, which are kind of more human-like harpies, and then there's actual harpies that are more monster-like. And I guess the idea is, if harpians do it with each other, then they just create harpies. But if harpian girls do it with guys, then you know, that's where more harpians come from. It's weird hentai logic, which is kind of weird because, you know, this doesn't say that, but it almost kind of implies that a little bit, doesn't it? But I've gone a little off the rails. I've talked about a lot of things that are bad with it. I guess the one other thing is, I know it's trying to do some game references that feel awkwardly placed. So, like, Cinnamon has a scene in the game where, you know, the cats with their bells are trying to teach the cats without bells more stuff, so that the cats without the bells will eventually take their bell exam, get their bells, and maybe be given slightly less slave restrictions. And I say that in a very negative way because, you know, that's really what it is. It's even worse than Pokemon in many ways. And that's pretty bad, so you should have a pretty good idea. But the idea is, you know, she was reading knowledge from a book, and this one was about the reproductive organs of flowers, and so she kind of obsessed about those because, you know, they're cat girls, so they are more influenced by instinct, and I have a completely separate rant about that. But the point is, you know, she hears this thing about the flowers' reproduction, and she can't help but get a little hot and bothered herself. And I didn't think that was her character, to just be hot and bothered. It was just that she was kind of a little more impulsive than the others, and so she had more trouble composing herself. In fact, I kind of got the implication that many of the cat girls from the head family are a little like that, and that maybe they knowingly or unknowingly use a more prestigious power to kind of say, oh yeah, the cat girls got through. Yeah. We bribed the right people. They didn't actually say bribe, but, you know, it kind of almost feels like that. I'm trying to think other examples, because I remember one where the cats weren't supposed to pounce on certain food, and they did anyways. And I guess my point is, in the first episode, out of the blue, for no reason, Cinnamon just starts talking about pistols and stamina, and it's just like, in the game, the context made sense of how it came up, and the anime just feels like, oh, I guess they're trying to say she's the horny one, except when... But, I don't know. Again, the anime also doesn't seem to really understand cats, and so when these cat girls are doing stuff, it doesn't really feel like they're doing things because they're cats, and it doesn't feel like they're doing things because they're girls. It just feels like the anime is like, oh yeah, I want them to do this because it kind of sort of resembles something cats sometimes do, not why they do it, when they do it, etc. And yeah, like I said, it's really easy to complain about a whole lot of this stuff. But let me get the good part. So, all of this is like, okay, what about the problem where a show needs to give you a reason to come back and want to watch it? Because a lot of this stuff is just like, this is just descriptions of kind of the universe as they set up, and it doesn't seem like there's any motivations for the characters. But the first episode gives us a motivation. That's what this little kitten is, and the idea is Chocla encounters a kitten while she's on an outing, and she doesn't bring it home, but it follows her home, and then it's like, oh, well, suddenly it's interesting, because, you know, even if the mannerisms don't quite work right, you do still have this little kitten, and I was kind of hoping it was going to be a boy kitten, just to address that, well, what happens to the cat boys? You know, please, give me something that doesn't make my mind go those dark directions. But, nah, it's all girls. So it's whatever. But she's definitely the one that makes it interesting. And she's not the only one driving the show, but it's her presence and the characters kind of going through, oh, here's a stray kitten. You know, they have to determine, is it actually a stray? What are they going to name it? What do they teach it? What does it like, does it not like, etc., etc. And it, of course, raises more questions, but it works. So, like, the game, whatever is weird about it, at least you're playing that with the idea of, oh yeah, you're reading a story about a guy who's trying to open up his first pastry shop, and his two cats insist on following him. And they happen to be human girls, and then, I don't know, this sister kind of turns it into a cat cafe, I guess. I don't think that actually happens in the first game, but I think the sister's directing things in that direction. The OVA is just an OVA version of that, and it works out because, there's all these things, but as a presentation, it just sort of like, you kind of feel like you don't have to invest too much time in it, and at least stays interesting moment to moment too. And with this, that stuff wouldn't work because it's supposed to be a series, 12 episodes or something like that. I can't even read the back right now to tell. So, the kitten does a really good job. It's kind of an exploration of an element of this world that's not down those dark routes, and I would kind of hope that maybe it would answer those, but I don't think it can, because I don't think it can take complete liberties with the material from the games, and it doesn't help that I haven't seen anything outside of the first game. So I haven't played the 0th game, I haven't played the 2nd and the 3rd, and I'm not sure if there's 4th. Technically, I never even finished the first game, but I did some quick Googling, and she is an anime unique character, so that is that, and again, it works. Oh yeah, and the final thing I guess I was going to bitch about was instinct, and this is a problem where I think people have this weird idea of instinct as well. It's very shallow. Oh yeah, so the animal knew to dig in the tree because of instinct, and humans just don't know to do that because they don't have instinct. Like, no, humans have instinct. Animals have instinct. The trick is, it's more of an urging to respond to certain stimuli, which can also be something that's learned and taught. So, like, plenty of animals actually learn that stuff, the foraging or hunting skills, from their parents, Not everything just has everything to kind of make it want to do the right thing at every point in time. This isn't to say that there aren't hardwirings, but it's funny because people don't really understand that humans have a lot of instinct and hardwiring in us as well. I mean, we even have reflexes, where there's a reflex where if you hit a certain part of the knee, it kicks out. And that's not exactly instinct, but it's actually not necessarily along different lines, because we have plenty of things that we're very instinctual about. The thing that usually makes humans different is, I think, I was trying to think it's the cerebral cortex, but right now I just am only thinking of the words, so take that with an entire fucking gallon of salt. But the idea is, humans have a big part of their brain devoted to being able to make more nuanced decisions with the instinct information. And really what instinct is certain stimuli producing certain urges, and not all animals react to those, not all of them get it produced as strongly, but a lot of these things were just like, okay, yeah, well, its instinct was to do this. Well, there isn't something that's in their brain that says, when scenario B, A, raise right arm, move left and grab. It's a lot more complicated than that, but we really shouldn't think that we are so much above animals that we don't have things like that. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm thinking of talking about, but I'm just like, I probably really shouldn't be talking about like sex and stuff like that on here. And the point is, the fact that we can train like dogs and stuff to kind of ignore, oh, there's food there, I got to eat it, is kind of, along the same lines. And there's some animals that have better cognitive facilities set up in order to override those, and others which kind of don't. But the entire idea is, instinct is really just kind of urgings, and that's why it's kind of weird in here, because they're like, oh, well, cats have a urge to do this, and, well, they call it an instinct in the show, because that's how they make it where all of a sudden the character changes from a shallow anime girl representation to a shallow anime cat girl representation, and it's weird. I think some examples could be like cats wanting to be on a box area because, you know, there can be psychological things where it's just like they kind of learned over time that makes them feel more comfortable, and in reality it's, you know, certain things that are kind of hardwired in their brain to kind of recognize those scenarios to help them seek them out and kind of use them, but it doesn't mean that they see boxes and cats are hardwired to sleep in boxes, just that boxes happen to trigger enough of the things that make cats go, oh yeah, I want that. I don't know. And this isn't new to the anime. It's, you know, been a problem with Nekopara the whole time, where, you know, it's just kind of haphazard with what the hell instinct means. And again, it comes down to, okay, you don't watch Nekopara because these are accurate representations of girls who are cats, or cats who are girls, or anything like that. It's got different purposes to it. You're supposed to enjoy the character designs and the interactions. And again, the anime is a little better than that because, you know, you're given the kitten and you're kind of curious, well, how's everything going to progress forward for the kitten? So, you know, and I haven't watched further to see if they ruined that, because I'm not quite sure how they can make that last for 12 entire episodes. Not without actually being substantive, more substantive than it actually is, but, you know, it's entertaining. I know I'm bitching a lot about it, but that said, I've enjoyed both of the anime I've watched, and, you know, I've complained about the parts that have gotten on my mind. So, Monster Hunter Rise. I think it's actually worthwhile to talk about, because with the 3.0 update, which came out Wednesday last week, that was Wednesday for us, it came out Thursday last week for Japan, but that was Japan midnight Thursday, which was like 8 p.m. Wednesday for us. So, very nice that we got to kind of download it, look at it, and say, I have not gone through everything in it, but it did add a more official ending to the story. So the base game has an ending to the story with an intentional hook that's supposed to be like, there's more to come. And it's not supposed to be another game, it's supposed to be more future update content. And for what it was, it's okay. Monster Hunter isn't necessarily one of those games where the story is all that riveting. Let's take Monster Hunter 3. Oh yeah, you're a new hunter showing up at this village. I think you showed up. Maybe you were growing up there. I don't think so. Oh, but they have earthquakes every once in a while. They're pretty sure it's a Logiakrus. And eventually you hunt it, and it's like, yeah, oh wait, there's still an earthquake. Well, then what is it? Well, it's an Elder Dragon. It's always an Elder Dragon. You know, gotta watch out for those Elder Dragons. There's really not much story there to it, and the same thing goes here, although I think there's a little more story to this than traditionally. The main problem is just that it sort of feels like they went, okay, here's the almost end of the story, and then they jumped to, alright, here's the actual one. And it might not be the same for new people coming in, because there's probably going to be a bit more of a break for them. For me, I reached that point, and then I was just like, okay, yeah, I can do all these other Elder Dragons immediately, and unlock my HR and go as high as I want, and, you know, that meant that as soon as the update came out, I got the, the final piece of story, which other people I was playing with at the time didn't have, because apparently I've been grinding the game a lot more than a lot of people in most of my peer groups. For different reasons. I think some of it is just some of them are more busy than I am. Others are not wanting to put as much energy into it because they're going to play it more when the PC version comes out next year with their other friends that play a whole lot. And that's all fair. So talking about all that, it does finally culminate in one final boss. And I guess it's just like the anime where there's things to bitch about, but for the most part, it's actually pretty good. There's definitely one attack that's kind of complete fucking bullshit. Like, it has to do with things rotating in opposite directions. The problem is, stuff like that can kind of work on a 2D plane really well because, you know, you're given a better field of view and ability to track it. But the problem in the 3D game is you only have one fucking camera pointed in one fucking direction. So either you're facing one where you can't see the stuff coming from the side, or you're facing one where you can't see the stuff coming from the back. And it causes a lot of damage. It's, kind of complete bullshit. The boss itself also has some things where it was moving in ways that it didn't seem to be targeting me, but still ended up following me. And I think it was just following somebody else, and I just happened to dodge the wrong way 3 times in a row. But, you know, there's annoyances like that. But thematically, other than the fact that I kind of feel like it's slightly cheapened some of the story elements in a slight way, it still works out pretty well. And because the boss really kicked my ass the first time I did it, I had to study and come up with an idea for what I wanted to do to actually tackle it. And I actually came up with something that's, I think, is neat. So, with the unlocking of this final boss, one thing they did was they made it where the previous 2 final bosses back in the pre 3.0 update, so the original final story bosses, which, you know, weren't really both at the end, but they were the things that's like, yeah, these 2 things are what the game's really about. Their armor sets constitute the final boss armor sets, I guess, and they were kind of neat, but kind of like, but still, yeah. They didn't seem like they'd be good on their own. But with this, you can now upgrade both of those, and they gain an ability where if you... Basically, they didn't have any slots, so you couldn't add any extra abilities to any individual armor piece, which suggested they would be better if they were mixed and matched with other stuff, and they didn't seem perfect for that. But now, they both gain an ability after you upgrade them fully. Technically, there's 2 more armor level upgrades after the skill upgrade. Basically, all those one-off skills they had suddenly get boosted up to 2 points, or 3 points, technically. And that one's really interesting because it's like, oh, well, yeah, you can make that happen for other armor, so you can find stuff and boost stuff, and maybe you can mix and match this and that. You don't get gem slots, but you do get a lot of skills, finally, that don't seem to mix too well. But my thought looking at that stuff was, wait, that skill that boosts skills, that doesn't apply if you only wear one or the other armor sets. It can work with a mix of them. And I had some mixes that are like, well, that actually looks pretty interesting. And so I spent a lot of I had a 5-day weekend. You know, Memorial Day would have made it 3 days, but I took a couple of extra days. One of them was just to, it was a better day to try and get my car inspected. And then I realized, well, that was Thursday. I should just take Friday off and turn it into a 5-day weekend. Thank God I did, because first of all, I was able to go really deep into all this stuff and grind all the final bosses, all of them, just a whole lot, just to build stuff up. And I really like what I created. It's probably not unique, but it's still fun. That one move, spinny move, and y'all know what it is. If you've done the final boss, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I still think it's bullshit, but it's getting a lot more manageable. I only have 600 defense, so it's still kicking my ass. But and there's maybe been a couple of other stuff I've been able to explore because of that. But the interesting thing is I've held off on trying out Volstrax. So if you're not familiar with Volstrax, maybe because you don't play Monster Hunter or you haven't played Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, he's a laser jet dragon. He shoots lasers, he flies around like a jet, and he's an Elder Dragon. Good stuff. I kind of forgot how awesome some of his equipment is, especially since Monster Hunter Rise doesn't give us a whole lot of white level sharpness, and his weapons are pretty much all or nothing. So they have a lot of white, but then they go in instantly to red. But that's perfectly fine, because even for the rate that I've been sharpening, this would mean that the white stays white a whole lot longer with his weapons, and with so many rampage slots, they actually aren't too bad for damage dealing. I just kind of have to decide if I want to use that one ability or not. It sounds bad to me, because it doesn't sound like it actually gets rid of the blight, or the blight's effects. But, you know, I just say that. It is whatever. Anyways. Yeah. Anyways, interesting stuff. So, Let's see. Commentary-wise on the final boss battle, people really love the final boss battle music. It's one of those epic Monster Hunter fights which transitions to proof of a hero for the final part of the battle. And that's pretty cool, but I think some people like the boss music better, and so, that should tell you that, it's an interesting experience. And none of that stuff's necessarily bad, there's just interesting preferences there. And I'm going to hold off on Volstrax, I think. I'm going to try to hold off on Volstrax. I don't know, that sword looks really good. I want that sword. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be able to distract myself watching anime. I am curious about one or two of them. But all good stuff. I was just trying to think if there's anything else I should really say. But, no. I guess that's it. Y'all, have a nice week.